The way that we do it, this is called isolation of motion. Everybody does it. For example, Mr. Marasigan, you can actually move your upper torso without moving your hips, right? Because you're sitting down, your hips can't move. A belly dancer can wiggle their hips without moving their shoulders, like Shakira can, right? Women usually do this a lot. Women, because of the way that the hips are splayed outwards and the way that the hips are connected, it's a wider base. The hips actually move in a circular motion. Guys kind of walk like this, and then women kind of walk like this. All right. So we need to get that separation of motion in place. Buzz Lightyear in Toy Story 3 dancing a Latin dance, their hips move along, right? So we need to have that separation of motion. Right now we can't do it. If we move the hips, they move everything else along with it. Not good. Alright? Okay, so if you dance like this, something's wrong with you, right? Okay. So to do that separation of motion, we're going to create a couple of control curves again. A couple of nerve circles, we'll snap them to where spine 1 is. Okay. So we'll snap this to spine 1. I will scale it up just a little bit and we'll call this hip control. Hip control. In this hip control, I will modify these transformations, edit, delete by type history, duplicate it, and scale it. Okay, and then right mouse click on it, control vertex. I just want this to be visually different so it's easier to select. Okay, I don't want to select that. Okay, so we'll just scale this up. Let's not select this. Scale this. Alright. And then do the usual stuff with it. We want to delete by type history. Edit, delete by type history. Don't need to modify for freeze transformations because it's already there where we want it. So, we're going to do something called constraining specific translations. How do we do that? For example, if I have several polygons, a sphere and a cube, let's just move them in place. Okay. This is kind of like our situation right now. If I parent this sphere to this square, if I attempt to move the square, the sphere moves along with it because it's parented, right? So this is the exact same thing. If I move my hips right now, the upper body moves along with it because it's parented. So we want to override certain parts. With parenting, we can't. We have to do all of it, translate, rotate, and scale. So to do the overriding, we're going to use constraints. Let's start with spine 1 first. So select this, let's call it spine 1 control. Spine 1 control. And then select spine 1 control itself. Go to constraint, orient constraint, which constrains the rotation. So go to the options, click on maintain offset, everything should be set to default, and then click on add. So what this does immediately is that if we now move the hips, the upper body will not move along with it. Alright, can you see better? Alright. But when we finalize our rig, all of the control structures will move all of the joints that we want. So this means that we should never select a joint. We will only select curves. So we need to control the hip correctly. But if we parent the hip directly to this hip control, bad stuff would happen. So we're going to use constraints instead. So select hip control, select the hips, constrain, and then point constraint. Point constraint will allow us to move the hip. But if we rotate the hip control, you'll notice nothing happens. Excuse me. Now we also need to constrain the rotation. So select hip control, select the hip, and then constrain, orient constraint. So now if we move this, hip will move, and the hips will also rotate. Okay. Now, one last thing. You'll notice that if I translate the hips, that this control gets left behind. Parenting this control to this control is illogical, because if we do that, we'll be back to square one. If we move the hips, the upper body moves along with it. So we need for a way for this to be moved along with the rest of the body when the body moves. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an orient constraint. Translate constraint. So select spine 1, control, constraint, point constraint. Alright? So when we move the lower hip, that control moves along with it. But if we rotate the hip, spine 1 control will prevent the upper body from rotating as well. So let's get this out so you can get your Shakira on, right? There we go. And you can move the upper body separately just by selecting this control curve. Okay, one last thing for your assignment. You'll notice that the head isn't balancing correctly. For us humans, when we get off balance, the head will automatically try to remain in a vertical position. So if you get pushed backwards, your head will stay in a vertical position. If you're pushed forward, your head will be in a vertical position. For example, Mr. Reyes is crouching downwards. His upper body is tilted, but his head is perfectly vertical. Right? So let's do the same thing. So this is very similar to the spine 1 constraint. So create a nerve circle, okay, and then just snap it to the head joint. Okay. And having snapped it to the head joint, excuse me. Alright, let's scale this just a little bit, and let's call this head control. Head control. Okay, and then modify freeze transformation, edit, delete by type history. Okay. And select this, select the head joint, constraint, orient constraint. Select the head joint, select this, head control, and then constraint, point constraint. That's it. So if your character kind of gets, selected, let's unselect the joints. Alright, we move this backwards. The character will try to keep its head steady. See? So, never be off balance. And he can shake his hips.
Hips don't lie.
And move his torso without fear of getting knocked over, right? There you go. That's it. For your assignment, integrate these controls into your walk cycle. And for your midterms, you need these. Friday submission. Your model for finals, it has to be rigged, UV map and textured. Your animatic has to be complete, and it has to be ready by Friday next week. Ngayong Friday. Next week.
Kulit mo.
Yung sa animatics po, yun na po yung sa storyboard.
If I approve your storyboard, you can go for animatic. So it's kind of easy to do. So you can, hold off on that until next meeting, until Monday next week. All right, any questions?